Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time zone you're in. My name is Lyriander, and welcome back to my to the Daedric Podcast, to my stream and the Daedric Podcast. We had some technical issues earlier, so we're doing it again. So today's episode, I am once again joined by our good co-host Tom.
Hello, I'll give you. You
Yeah.
said my podcast. How dare you?
I'm having a bad day. Shut up.
Yeah.
Oh god. Yeah, we're gonna talk about the wars that took place in Tamriel, and we're just gonna go through them in every era.
From simple conflicts between nobles to full-on genocidal crusades. We will cover it all.
Yes. Also, hello,
And-
moderator.
We both are slurring our speech today, and we have names today to pronounce, like the word of Ben Dumbakar or something like that.
Yeah.
This is gonna be fun.
Yes. Whilst we are talking about this, the viewers on YouTube or on Twitch will be able to see the playthrough of both me and Tom once again. I am in my Skyrim playthrough. I am finishing the companion's questline and a few other quests, and then go back to the mage's questline. Whilst that is happening, Tom, what were you doing?
Yeah, I am currently doing the Knights of the Nine DLC for Oblivion. I am retrieving all the artifacts of the Crusader and battling with the stupid puzzles that they implemented in the game for each of the piece. Like, some of the puzzles are okay, some are fuck you, Todd Howard.
Okay, let me start them up. There we go. All right. Oh, it's loading. That's a great start. There we go. Yes. So the first war is a war we have mentioned before. It's the Alessian Slave Rebellion, which took place all the way back in the first era in the year 242, and then lasted 1 year until 243. Under the leadership of the slave queen Alicia, the enslaved Proto-Cyrodiils rebelled against their alien overlords. Humans back in those days were basically the slaves of the Aelids, who were the wild elves, who were very power hungry and were Daedra worshippers. So kind of humans didn't like that, so they rebelled, and with the legendary nomad warrior Perennial Whitestrake, they were able to bring down the Aelids pretty easily, actually. And he dealt Perennial dealt the final blow when he killed Umarail the Unfeathered in the White Gold Tower. However, Perennial died along with the Aelid king, cut into 8 pieces in mockery of the divines by the Aelids, who were obsessed with this number 8. This is also the guy whose armor pieces Tom is collecting right now.
And currently wearing.
Yeah, part of some of them.
Some pieces.
Yeah.
Namely the fucking skull I am wearing on my head.
Yeah, you're not wearing his skull, that's for sure. The victory of the war, while extremely beneficial to the Proto-Cyrodiils, signaled the slow decline of the Aelids' power, which would truly end in the year 500 of the First Era, after the late Aelid period. That's the Alessian Slave Rebellion.
Next up, we have the War of Succession, which began by the assassination of the Skyrim king Borgas by something called the Wild Hunt. Now, the Wild Hunt is a mysterious phenomenon that happens when a group of Bosmer perform this type of ritual that transforms them into this immaterial mass of pure hatred, and their only goal is to kill and to uh, avenge something. Uh, Wild hunts have been recorded in the history. There are like three notable ones. You can also encounter a wild hunt in the Elder Scrolls Online games. Uh, but I'm going of course here. King Borgas was assassinated by the Wild Hunt, and a civil war sparked in Whiterun. Uh, the war was absolutely disastrous for Skyrim because of the infighting. Skyrim originally in the first era had sort of its own empire where they had power over High Rock, Morrowind, and some parts of Cyrodiil. And because of the infighting, they lost all of that. And some of its bigger cities, like Windhelm, for example, were completely sacked. And eventually, uh, in the first era, year 420, nice, uh, the War of Succession finally ended, and Olaf One-Eyed was named the High King of Skyrim. Olaf One-Eyed probably rings a bell for some of you who played Skyrim. You can actually encounter him in Sovngarde, and he is also one of the Draugr bosses that you encounter in the game.
Indeed. And you have to deal with a bard who discredited his legends.
Yeah. It's the Bard College quest.
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah.
Up next, we have the Anaquin conquests, which took place in the fifth century of the first era. And it is a series of military expansions conducted by Darlock Bray, the golden beast of Anaquina. And for those of you who don't know, Anaquina is basically the northern part of Elsewhere. This period is perceived as glorious by the Khajiit, who, with the loot of the conquests, used that loot to advance the greatest of the Golden Beast's architectural projects. At the height of the Anaquin conquests, the borders of his realm went as far as the Strid River in the west, with Kaj Ravlit being the westernmost point, to the Lasius River in the east, encompassing all lands between Arentia and the Rimmon, which for the Khajiit is a pretty big deal because they were not exactly known as conquerors. But I basically got rich to this guy, thanks to this guy. Yeah, that's most of what I can say about this war.
So next up,
Yes.
the War of the Crag. Now, Skyrim, we all know as the homeland of the Nords, but before the Nords, it was inhabited by a race of snow elves. The Nords and the Snow Elves waged wars for centuries, but eventually the Nords actually they defeated the Snow Elves and drew them out. After their after their defeat, the Snow Elves sought refuge with the Dwemer, the Deep Elves or the Dwarves that resided in the mountains of Skyrim and way deep under it in the giant cavern known as Black Reach. The Dwemer actually agreed to help the Snow Elves, which are sometimes known as the Falmer, and they agreed to help them. They agreed to hide them before the Nords, but under one prerequisition. They would need to eat a toxic fungus that used to be native to Black Reach, and this toxic fungus actually rendered the Snow Elves blind. And they not even that. They actually gave them this fungus into their day-to-day diets, and it altered their DNA, to speak. Right? Like DNA is not canon in Elder Scrolls, but it altered their blood or something like that, and even their offsprings would be born blind. So it wasn't just the current generation. It would decimate their entire race. So they agreed to this because they had no other options. And eventually the Dwemer betrayed the Snow Elves because they forced them to be slaves to them and objects of experimentation. And after generations, the former rebelled, as it goes with usurpers. They rebelled against their Dwemer masters, and so began a really long, like 200 years, I think. 200 years.
Yeah, it's never specified exactly
it's never
how
stated.
long.
It's stated. We know for a fact when it ended.
Yes, we know when it ended.
But we don't know where it began.
Exactly. It began in the 7th century. That's all we know.
Yeah, somewhere after the Nords drove the Snow Elves out. So they were waging a war against them under the surface, unbeknownst to the Nords, and once in First Era 700, suddenly they managed to actually barge their way in one of the major capitals of the Dwemer ruins, into of the Dwemer cities, and
weren't ruins yet.
They went inside, and there were no Dwemer there, because all of the Dwemer disappeared. Mm-hmm. They just poofed out of the existence.
Yes.
And this marked the end of the War of the Crag. And why they disappeared?
Yes. We move on to the next war, which was taking place in roughly the same time period, the War of the First Council. Now, we have mentioned this war before in our talk about the heroes of the epic figures in the Elder Scrolls lore, and but I will briefly summarize
this war 3 times.
Yeah, I mean it is a big event, though. I mean,
it's one of it's the major war that is.
Yeah, no, I mean one of the key things that happened was that first of all, it was somewhere between 668 and the year 700. We know exactly that it ended in the year 700, but that's it. And it was waged between the Dwemer and the Kimmer great houses, as well as the nomadic Ashlanders of Vardenfell, who had united under General Indoril Nevravar. The Nords of Skyrim, under High King Wulfart, also entered the fray, seeking to reclaim Morrowind and amidst the chaos and restore the First Empire of the Nords. They had lost their control over Morrowind during the War of Succession. And, basically in the aftermath of the final battle, which was the Battle of Red Mountain, one of the biggest battles to ever take place in Tamriel, the Dwemer had mysteriously disappeared, meaning that they ended both this war and the War of the Crag. Nerevar was dead, House Dagoth was dissolved and assimilated to the other houses, and a new religion was born, revering the living gods of the Tribunal, and who later cursed Vorin Dagoth, the former High Counselor of House Dagoth. It was also after this event that the Dunmer became a thing, because the Kimmer elves were cursed by Azora, and they now they have an incredible tan. Some
bloodshot eyes.
Yeah, some sources claim that the war coincided with the sun's death in the year 668, a cataclysmic eruption of Red Mountain that devastated Morrowind, tainted the skies with ash, and blotted out the sun for a year. So some say that happened during that war, so that's how we know it's at least in the year 668. But if you want to know more, by the way, about these figures, then do watch our other episode 14, from the top of my head, about the epic historical figures. And if you want to know more about the Falmer and the Dwemer, there's also an episode about that. But moving on to the next war.
Yeah, we have the War of the Singers. Now, the majority of the wars we talk about take place in Tamriel, and this one took place in Yokuda. The now sunken continent far west of Tamriel. The original place of the Red Guards. Now, the War of the Singers was a conflict fought between the brigand army of Emperor Hira and the Sword Singers of Yokuda prior to their migration to Tamriel. Now, there is a lot to talk about in this war. I don't want to go to great detail. The summary is that the Emperor Hira this story is highly reminiscent of the original Star Wars trilogy. I'm not kidding. Like, if you actually read it, it's an elite group of sword warriors, a corrupt emperor, and the corrupt emperor has a trusted general, and the trusted general has a son that is lost to ages. And then the son and the father reconnect, and he trains the son, and then together they take down the emperor.
That sounds like Star Wars.
And the thing is, the son and the father are sword singers. Sword singers are sword magicians from Yokuda. It's an ancient art that the Yokudans trained, and the very skilled sword singers are able to summon something called the Ansei, which is a spirit sword. It's a sword made from their soul, which everybody perceives as a sword made out of solid light. So
yeah, very Star Wars.
Literally wielding lightsabers. This is just true. Star Wars. Come on. Anyway, they killed the emperor, and then the father died, as it does. This is, and because of the sword singers, the constellation of the warrior descended upon the mortal realm, wielding this super powerful Ansei that was said to cause earthquakes and thunder and stuff like that. And that thing is said to be the main cause behind sinking of Yokuda. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Is that all you wanted to say about that?
Because there's not much sources for this one.
Mm-hmm.
Because Yokuda is one of the lost, the mysterious continents that we have on Nirn.
Well, if the next Elder Scrolls game, Redfall, is indeed going to take place in Hammerfell, we might learn more.
Yeah, and the Swordsinger thing, I think it's going to be actually explored, because
instead of the
either that or something, because people are, exactly, because people are way too used to the special ability, and
to suddenly go back to no longer being special. It's like
I think the sword singing is the thing that's gonna be in the next.
It fits. It fits the bill. All right, moving on to the next war. We have the War of Righteousness, which was held between the year 2321 and 2331. So it's a 10-year war. Decade long, if you want to put it in other words. It's a conflict that led to the dissolution of the Alessian Order, and with it the Alessian Empire, aka the First Empire. The main cause of the conflict is believed to have been internal strife with the order within the order itself, brought about by the unsustainable expansion of the priesthood. Several of the Empire's territories took the opportunity to distance themselves from the Order or break away entirely, which is something that is quite realistic, and I feel like it has happened in actual history with the Catholic Church and everything.
Yeah,
And then Rome fell.
Yeah, a lot of the wars in the Elder Scrolls universe are inspired by real world events.
I mean, the Battle of Red Mountain and just the War of the First Council is pretty original, I think.
I said some of the
inspired. That's true. Sorry,
inspired.
Let's see. Yes, several of the emperors, they took they broke away. When Western Cyrodiil isolated itself and established an autonomous government, the Calovian Estates, the simmering tension among the Order erupted into open warfare. And that's also why you will see that the western part of Cyrodiil has a kind of different atmosphere to it than like the rest of Cyrodiil. So that's like from Skingra to Kavach and Anvil. They have a bit of a different, different flavor to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. While there is no information about how or by whom the war was fought, there are some details about the destruction it caused. Reportedly, half of the contemporary population of the Iliac Bay, aka the western part of Cyrodiil, was wiped out in the violence, and the Alessian Order's great monastic complex at Lake Canalus was razed. The next war that shows up is actually the first war that doesn't have the word war in the name. Is the first Akaviri invasion, which took place in the year 2703. It was the first major interaction between the Akavir and Tamriel, as a large Tsessi armada landed on the northern coast and marched through Morrowind and Skyrim to the Ural Mountains, defeating all in their path. However, by landing in Morrowind, the invaders had arisen the anger of Vivek, one of the tribunal, one of the living gods, who allied with the trident kings of the Drow to attack from behind, cutting off the Akaviri supply lines and their route to sea. They were brought to a halt by a lack of supplies and set up headquarters at the defensible Pale Pass, where they were met with the forces of the United Cyrodiil under the command of Remen the First.
Yeah. The Drow that you talked about,
Yes.
For those that of you that don't know, the Drow or the Draug or something, it's hard to pronounce.
Yeah, I think it's Drew. Yeah, Drew.
Droog. Yeah.
Drew. That sounds.
are a race of sentient crustacean people.
Crab people, basically.
Crab people. Crab people. Taste like crab, talk like people. Also, Sayesi, not Teishi.
Oh, sorry.
There's a lot of hard to pronounce names in this one.
Yeah. This last part about the Pale Pass is actually something you did, like in one of the quests in Oblivion. You actually go.
Oh
to
yeah,
the Pale
yeah.
Pass.
I did. I retrieved some
artifacts.
artifacts.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you want to read more about that or learn more about that, there's a book in the game that gives you more about that, and people talk about it. So that's where to be. It's in Bruma, I think.
The Countess in Bruma gives you the quest.
There you go. Moving back to the war, Remen I's army had only begun to advance into the mountain when the entire Akaviri force abruptly surrendered, kneeling before Remen and saying that they had found what they had came to Tamriel to seek, namely Remen I, who was a dragonborn, which is what they were looking for. Remen integrated many of the Taisi veterans into his armies, and his personal service, also known as the Blade, Yes, at first there was a dragon guard, and then it was turned into the blades later. And used them to great effect in his subsequent campaigns, which resulted in the Second Empire.
Yeah. Now, following that, we have the Blackwater War. After Raymond I's demise, came his son, Raymond II.
That works.
Which seized the northern and eastern marches of Argonia, resulting in the formation of the imperial province of Black March. While the imperial forces won several decisive battles in the early stages, their progress quickly stagnated due to the brutal terrain, endless raids, disease, and mysterious disappearances. Black Marsh is regarded as one of the most hard to live in places in all of Tamriel. It's as the name suggests, it's just the entirety of the region is just an endless jungle and marshes and like hostile as fuck, with giant insects and like sap that kills you if you eat it and you're not the right race, and it's fun. And that's not even the best thing, because there's if you set up camp next to a city of the Scaly Boys, if they see you and a tree tells them that they should not like you, you are in big trouble. Anyway, after several failed campaigns, each employing wildly different tactics, the conflict declined into a protracted and complex guerrilla war with no clear victor. Eventually, the whole world ended one day when the Argonians just buried their weapons and just went on their day-to-day lives. There was no peace treaty signed. The Argonians just woke up one day and were like, okay, nothing happened. We're just gonna go back to our
point has been made.
Yeah. Point has been made. 8 to 5 job resumed. Now, there are some major events that happened during this war. One of the most interesting ones is called the Great Burn. Because, as I said, the terrain in the Black March is extremely inhospitable. And one of the garrisons attempted to actually dry out the marches, and or it's like beating the bog or something like that. You dry out bogs by burning big fires. So they did that. They started big fires. The problem is that if you ever seen Avatar, the 2009 movie from by James Cameron, that's Black Marsh. It's all connected, and
you could
the underground root structure of Black Marsh just caught on fire, and from several fires secluded in one place, the entire fucking province was set ablaze. Like hundreds of species of unique flora and fauna just completely extinct. Entire tribes of Argonians like gone in a matter of days or weeks. And even the Legion, like all of their camps, like half of them were burned, and like they retreated because of that.
Yep. It's so also
they just try to dry out some bogs, and they just.
It's also funny
killed
that you
half the fucking Argonia.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned Avatar, because technically Avatar: The Last Airbender also has the Great Swamp, which is also all connected.
So it was an universal reference.
Yeah. Next up,
So
it's you again.
next up, we have the Fourscore War. The Fourscore War was also done by our boy Remand II, who was he was stupid, wasn't he? Yeah, because
Well,
like
quite
his
stupid indeed.
father managed to like 4D chess unite fucking Tamriel, and this guy is like, okay, I'm gonna try invading Black Marsh and then Morrowind. Why?
Yeah, I mean, he
Like,
clearly didn't get the right genes.
no. Who was his mother?
Wow, that's rude.
So anyway, he tried to invade Morrowind. Morrowind, by this time, was guarded by the Tribunal, which is a trio of living gods. Not one, not two, three near invincible beings with unknown powers.
And
What?
to add a bit to that is also this was still when they had access to the heart. For those of you who
Yeah.
know what that means, but basically they're even more powerful.
Yeah, I think together they were godlike.
Yeah.
And so yeah, he tried this. He died.
What a surprise.
It was absolutely he tried to go around the borders of Morrowind. It was completely decimated. The war was in no way, shape, or form success, and he died and was succeeded by his sons Remand III and Basileus Dor.
Luckily, Thurman III was a better influence on the Empire.
Let's hope.
Yeah. So, last war of the first era is near the end, is the War of Uvitsil, or whatever way you pronounce that, which took place in the year 2911, and it ended in the year 2917. Now, this is a war there's not a lot of things known about this particular war, other than it was one of the biggest wars between the Altmer and the Slodes. And we haven't actually mentioned the Slodes all that often, but basically they were the OG necromancers. Basically, they are the species. They have an entire species focused on necromancy, and with their necromancy and their infernal machines, they attacked the Altmar, trying to retake the Somerset Isles, which was originally from of the Slodes, but then the Altmar took over, and you know how that goes. And apparently, to this day, there are still, after effects from that war, which took place in the first era, and now, wow.
Fun fact about the Slodes: they make soap from their own children.
Yeah, they're quite fucked up. That's for sure. Yeah, so other than that, there's not a lot known. There's also a different war that took place, sometime earlier, like in the year 1301, the Sack of Skywatch, which also has similar, still present effects. Next up, we have the second era. And the second era starts with the first war, which is Rance's War. As Tom sent me a message that the way to describe that war is basically a Breton soap opera. And well, yeah, you can say that. So in the
it's
yeah.
How else would you describe it? It's literally a Breton king talks to a different Breton king, and the Breton king number 2 suggests that the Breton king number 1 marries his daughter. But the Breton king number 1 meets a feisty Redguard woman and decides to marry her in a matter of weeks. And so he now has is an ally of the Redguards, and the Breton King too is very pissed at him, and they infight like little babies because of
Yeah, it's
love. Like,
yeah.
come on.
Oh, love. So this took place in the year 566 and the year 567 of the Second Era. The kings we were talking about is King Emeric of Wayrest, who had been courting Rael, the daughter of King Rancer of Shornhelm, when he suddenly married Princess Mariah, the daughter of the Redguard King, Faharajat of Sentinel. Rancer was deeply offended and withdrew his diplomats from Wayrest and started raising his levies and hiring mercenaries from Rivenspire over the course of 1 year. And finally, in last siege of the Second Era, year 566, he swept down from the northern mountains, taking Emmerich by surprise and nearly razing Wayrest immediately. Only the efforts of the king's personal guards saved the city and forced a protracted siege. Rancer's forces were insufficient to take the fortified city by storm, and so the siege dragged on as the tide of war turned against him. Rancer's aggression was unpopular even with his own nobles, and several prominent houses of Rivenspire withdrew their military support and sued for peace. While internal stresses took their toll, the original Daggerfall Covenant paid dividends as Camlorn, Evermore, and Daggerfall were compelled to come to Wayrest's aid. Meanwhile, Emmerich was cannily leveraging his diplomatic connections. His recent marriage ties with the Redguards summoned a fleet of fierce warriors across the Iliac Bay, while an offer to restore Asinium brought the orcs into the fray. That almost rhymed. Under Kurog Gro Bakrak, the old enemies of Shornhelm burned Rancer's holdings and were waiting to prevent the troops' retreat from the advancing Breton and Redguard forces. Caught between the hammer and anvil at Mark Waston Moor, Rancer's army was utterly destroyed. Only a select few were able to escape with the king, who retreated to a tor overlooking the smoking ruins of Shornhelm, hoping to make a last stand. Driven to desperation, Rancer turned to dark sorcery, but was murdered during the ritual by one of his own generals. The crown of Shornhelm went missing during the chaos, and that evil place has henceforth bore the name Traitor's Tor. Wow. So basically they were setting up the Daggerfall Covenant for a certain war that's coming up next. But first, we have... Tom, that was your cue.
Oh yeah. Second Akaviri invasion. I'm lost. There's so many tabs. Now, second Akaviri invasion. This happened during the Second Era, and it's also known as the Liberation War by the Argonians. In Akavir is the westernmost continent of from Tamriel. It's one of the most mysterious continents that we have, and is inhabited by several notable races, such as the Saesi, the Kapotun, or the Kamal, the ice demons that we have here. A fleet of Kamal under the command of Adasun Dir Kamal, nice name, invaded northern Tamriel during the interregnum of the Second Era. Interregnum is the period of history which falls between the Second Empire and the proclamation of the Third Empire. It's still in the Second Era, but it's between empires. So, for reasons unknown, the fleet, although originating from the east, bypassed the eastern shores of Vardenfell and Solstheim, instead landing in Windhelm in the north of Skyrim. Windhell was taken completely by surprise and destroyed, resulting in the death of the local queen and her heir, who both fell leading the troops. Only the prince survived, and he sought aid with the Greybeards. We know the Greybeards. That's a reference point.
Yay, great bit.
Greybeards, who summoned the mystical Ash King, the Under King, Wolfheart. With the aid of Wolfheart, the prince rallied his troops and fortified the Riften. Because they expected the Kamal to come for them, because they were coming from the north, and the Riften is just below Windhelm. But the Kamal simply avoided Riften and went for Morrowind. They went for the city of Stone in the Stonefalls. What's its name? The big city.
Stonefalls? I mean,
No.
sorry. Wait, hold on. Let me see where you are. Where is
Mournhold?
Oh, Mournhold. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. They went for Mournhold. The North refused to acknowledge this as a victory, and they went into their backs. The Kamal forces met with the Morrowind forces on the beaches of Ebonheart. Now, the Dunmerry forces were led by Almalexia, which is one of the tribunal. And together, they were basically tag team. The Kamal forces were tag teamed by both the Nordic forces, the Dunmer forces, and also, for some unknown reasons, an Argonian phalanx of shellbacks went from south to assist them in the battle. So these three armies together decimated the Cabal. And after this, the prince returned home and was crowned Skald King of Eastern Skyrim. And the Dunmer, as a recognition of their crusade, freed all the Argonian slaves that they had. This was basically the leading force behind the formation of the Ebonheart Pact. Now, why the Kamal went on this suicidal mission is unknown, but it's said that their leader, Adasumdir Kamal, supposedly said that they are in search of a person or an object that roughly translates as an ordained receptacle. What that is, I don't know.
I think
but it sounds cool. It sounds like a plot hook.
Yeah,
it sounds like a plot hook.
It sounds like a quest in Elder Scrolls Online. That's what it sounds like.
It's not. That's the thing.
We'll see. Oh,
maybe another
DLC
later.
Yeah, who knows?
So after the second Akaviri invasion, we have something called the Varen's Rebellion, also known as the Colovian Revolt. It was a rebellion against the Emperor Leovic, which was emperor of the imperial city. At the time, Leovic was actually a Reachman. Reachmen are natives of the Reach province of in Skyrim. They are supposedly of Breton origins, but it's not clearly stated. So Leovic angered the entirety of the empire by legalizing Daedra worship. And,
great move.
A great move. Yeah, basically saying, "Hey, I'm a Satanist now, so let's be all Satanists." So Duke Varen Aquilarius of Coral, or Coral, Yeah.
With Coral.
Coral. He mastered military forces of the Colovian state to dispose of him, and by this he triggered a rebellion. The rebellion lasted for just 1 year. Varen's base was in Bruma, and he led countless attacks on the imperial city, eventually storming it and confronting Leovic and his last legion in a bloody battle in the market district. Varen personally dispatched Leovic at the foot of the Ruby Throne before proclaiming himself the Emperor.
Yes, and that that was the beginning of his rule as Emperor, which if you've played Elder Scrolls Online, that is kind of a big deal. As we move on to the next war, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
He's the emperor that set it all off. So, in the year 580, the Three Banners War started and lasted for 2 years. Although whether it will truly be 2 years is up for debate, because these are the events of Elder Scrolls Online, and it is still updating. I think so. So, in the years leading up to the Three Banners War, also called the Alliance War or even the Great War, nice and vague, a divided Tamriel had witnessed a series of conflicts and crises that had inspired the different nations of the land to band together into 3 distinct alliances. We have mentioned these just now. The Greater Daggerfall Covenant in the Second Era, 566, the Ebonheart Pact in the year 572, and finally the First Aldmeri Dominion in the year 580. Now, these different groups have different reasons for joining or being part of this war. The Aldmeri Dominion was founded by Queen Erin in the midst of the interregnum, and it was conceived after Erin assumed the throne of Alinor. Having traveled Tamriel extensively before returning to the Somerset Isles, she was aware of dire threats menacing the world and saw it as a proper duty of the elves to put things right. That's right, they were already arrogant. But they were under the assumption that they basically knew best. And so they wanted to, look at all these child races, we shall put them back in order and take over the imperial throne again. Meanwhile, the Ebonheart Pact, as previously described, had formed between the 3 races in the east, and at some point the tribunal became aware of dark happenings in Cyrodiil and called upon its allies to mount a righteous war against the corrupt and disintegrating empire. And finally, Daggerfall just joined in because they were like, hey, they're having a war. We have been going pretty well with wars. Let's join them, and because we obviously know what we're doing, because we just took over a different kingdom. We just all united. So that's the start of all of those the pacts and the alliances and whatnot. And the competing ideologies of these alliances set them on a course for war. Tensions between them were further developed by the Soul Burst and the subsequent military aggression of the Empire of Cyrodiil under Empress Regent Clivia Thorn. Each alliance saw the opportunity to overthrow the corrupt imperial regime and install their own emperor on the Ruby Throne, but also had to deal with the other 2 alliances. As the armies of the Covenant, the Pact, and the Dominion invaded Cyrodiil with the goal of capturing the imperial city, they additionally launched attacks at each other. So technically, you could even claim that there was a 4th party in the war, namely the inhabitants of the Imperial City, which at that time was mostly just Daedra. The war's ultimate outcome is unknown, yes, but all 3 alliances, as well as the Empire of Cyrodiil, had ceased to exist by the 9th century of the Second Era. And that brings us to the next war, which is one of the fucking best wars, in my opinion.
Best is.
Best. Well, I mean, like, it's a big deal, fucking
Yeah,
Tiber
it's a
Septim.
big deal. Yeah, because it's hard to explain.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Okay.
It's hard to explain.
Next, we have the Tiber Wars. Tiber Wars were a series of conflicts spanning through the second half of the last century of the Second Era. Started by the Colovian warlord Kuhlakain, who was also known as Emperor Zil, and continued after his assassination by his general Tiber Septim. The results of the war were manifold. Most importantly, there was the end of the Interregnum, the start of the Third Empire, and also known as the Septim Empire, and the start of the Third Era. Now, the wars that happened during the Tiber Wars were great and were absolutely many. So let's get over them somewhat quickly. First, we have the Battle of Old Roldan, where Kulakaim's general Hjalti Earlybeard. Now,
This boy.
this boy, how to say this? It's either Hjalti Earlybeard or Tiber Septim. It's interchangeable, but it's not. Hjalti Earlybeard is one version of him, which is basically the opposition of Tiber Septim, calls him, and Tiber Septim is the quote-unquote official name that he had. So anyway, who knows? He led the Colovian troops and their allies into the Breachman forces, forcing them to fortify the Old Roldan. The next day, Hjalti Iber approached the gates of the besieged city, protected by the winds created by a storm following his trail. Reports say that the ancient Nord art of Foom, or the voice, or the dragon tongue, was used to shout down the walls of Old Roldan, after which Tiber's army took on the city with relatively easy. As a result, he was nicknamed Talos, meaning Storm Crown. His name is Talos Storm Crown, meaning his name is Storm Crown.
It's like the Sahara Desert, you know, desert.
Desert, yeah. Or it's so fucking.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
It's
so his Nord co-warriors named him Talos, meaning Storm. Next, we have Sack of Sancretor. While his army was distracting the majority of the defenders, Talos made his way inside the fortress of Sancretor, capturing the Nord and Breton leaders and making them order their troops to surrender. Saint Osla of Corel has a statue dedicated to her actions in battle, where she healed the warriors that had fallen in battle. Sancretor was abandoned and Talos recovered the Amulet of Kings from there. Next up, Battle of Five Bridges. After the initial success of his foes, Tiber Septim commanded his reserves to victory, attacking only after his foes were completely victorious, as advised by his battle mage Zurin Actus. Having been lulled into a false sense of security by their victory, Tiber took the enemy army by surprise, routing an army twice the size of his own. Then he took on the Imperial City after the siege of the capital. The battle ages of the Eastern Heartlands surrendered before Kuhlakan armies. Before he could crown himself emperor, he was assassinated by an unknown culprit, and Talos instead, or Tiber Septim, or Erilbir, was crowned instead of him and was named Tiber Septim. Moth Rebellion, an uprising in the Imperial City. The 3rd Legion, mostly made out of newly recruited Colovian peasant boys, was sent from nearby Anvil to Qualit. There, the Legion earned its sobriquet, the Faithful, while besieged in the Hezot barracks by the cultists. After the rebellion ended, Tiber Septim triumphantly re-entered the capital. Battle of Jalzi.
I'd say Bjolsai, but whatever. Yeah, it's a hard name.
Yeah. Should I read it Nordically or Italian-like? Or...
let's see. It's in Wayrest, which is
German or French. French.
Yeah.
Bretons were French.
Bjulsai.
Under the command of Amiel Richten, the Imperial squadron crushed Wayrest's naval power in a surprise. Naval.
Yes, it's naval. The naval forces.
Naval. In a surprise dawn attack. Sack of Senchal. This is an interesting one.
Yay, Senchal!
Senchal. After the besieged Khajiit refused to surrender, General Potrate ordered the 3rd Legion to attack the city of Senchal, and he basically gave them a free hand on. And safe to say, the civil casualties were so high, including children, that the battle was officially scratched from the sanctioned imperial history.
We killed a few too many children. We might not want to claim glory for this one.
Yeah, like, what happens if you give free hand to your soldiers? They fucking torture children to death. Yeah.
Lovely.
Next up, Battle of Black Rocks. The forces of Aldemary Dominion, caught in the 3rd Legion, caught the 3rd Legion by surprise and almost completely destroyed it. The remnants of it made the core of the newly created Ruby Legion stationed in the Nibene Valley. Battle of Stros Mackay. This is a fun one. Also known as the Battle of Hunting Bay by Imperials. Fleeing from the capital of Sentinel, Prince Ator rallied the remaining Redguard crowns for one final battle. The navies of both sides clashed near the Isle of Stros Mackay in the Hunting Bay. Leading the Imperial New West Navy was Lord Admiral Amin Richten, who brought in the dragon called Nafali
Largus, yes.
Nafali Largus, yeah.
Which, by the way, is his imperial name. His dragon name is slightly different. But...
Yeah. The turning point of the battle was Prince Ator's death by a poisonous arrow from Dram, a Dunmer assassin. Archmage Voa tried to save the prince, but due to the strength of the poison, he was forced to place his soul in a soul gem and to put his body in a magically induced stasis before being burned by the dragon. After their defeat, the remaining crowns fled to Stros Mackay. Most of them to the old quarter of the city, which was promptly burned to the ground by the dragon, killing them as a result. Some of the survivors took refuge at the local temple of Arkai. The priests there and gave them asylum, hiding the body of Prince Ator in the temple and healing the wounded, only to be forced to surrender, the latter to the Imperials. The result of the battle was that the Redguard forces, aside from the Crown Allegiant Restless League, were either completely annihilated or subdued. Following the crowning achievement of his career, Richten was made the provisional governor of Stros Mackay, reigning over the city with terror up to the for the next 3 months. Following that is an event called Stros Mackay Uprising,
Yes,
led by the siblings Cyrus. Cue Redguard intro.
Yes, this is this and the previous were basically just descriptions of the events in the game Redguard.
The Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard, which is a spin-off, but it's still a very
technically
good
a spin-off. Yes, it doesn't follow the exact same pattern as the other Elder Scrolls games because you don't have full control over your character. It's like you have to play as Cyrus. Period.
But it's a good game with some surprisingly good story, and you get to fight. No, you don't get to fight him. You get to see a dragon.
You do get to fight him a bit, but not really. Actually, no. Wait, you can kill him. I think it's not a true killing. Yeah, I don't. I haven't played the game, so I don't know for sure. But I think it was like that. Anyway.
Yeah. So the Stros Mackay Uprising, led by the siblings Cyrus and Ishara, the Restless League came out of hiding and stormed the palace, with Cyrus himself cornering the provisional governor Amian Richten and the imperial emissary Drum aboard a Dwemer dirigible. Cyrus' sword, enchanted with the soul of the prince, then killed them both. This act was allegedly the third incarnation of Hunding. Hunding is originally a Yokudan version of Anu and Padme together. It's one of the hard to explain phenomenons. It's 5 in 1. It's like a thing that happens. It's a phenomenon, and it's a being. Yeah.
It's like the Sylvanar. Yeah.
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 Next up, Rebellion of the Sentinel. After hearing of the Crowned Rebellion in Stros Mackay, Baron Volak, leader of the Forebears, came out of hiding and retook Sentinel from the provisional governor, Senectus Gotki. As a result of these 2 rebellions, the First Treaty of Stros Mackay was signed. Sack of Mournhold, one of the several battles that occurred after Septim's legions invaded Morrowind and before the Armistice.
Whatever. Could just go on.
Was signed. The city was raised by the royal family of Mournhold and wiped out, except for 5-year-old heiress Baranzaya. And then surrender of Alinor. After the Numidian besieged the capital of Somerset Isles, its fall happening within an hour. Alinor's fall marked the end of the Tiber Wars, finally unifying all of Tamriel, in turn leading to the proclamation of the Third Era. Yay!
Yay! Okay.
I told you it's hard to explain.
Very true. So now we're moving on to the Third Era, which you start again.
Yay! So, beginning the Third Era is a small conflict called the War of the Isle. The province of Somerset was nearly lost under the leadership of Antiochus. Antiochus was an emperor of the Septim dynasty. The Maormer king Orgunum of the island kingdom of Piedonea attacked Somerset Isles as a result of the political plot of Queen Potema of Solitude, also known as the Wolf Queen. The United Alliance of the Kings of Somerset and Antiochus only managed to defeat King Orgunum due to the Freak Storm. Legends credit the Stygic Order of the Isle of Arteum with the magic behind the storm and the victory, rather than the Imperial Navy. And next up, we have the War of the Red Diamond. War of the Red Diamond, we talked about this in our important historical figures podcast. It's basically the entirety of the interesting part of Queen Potema's life, also known as the Wolf Queen. The book series, the Wolf Queen, and the biography of the Wolf Queen documented these happenings to great detail. Safe to say, it was a plot that Potema made to become the empress of the empire, trying to scheming against her niece, the Empress Kenitra, and her father. What's his name? Emperor Zero.
So many emperors, hard to keep track.
So many emperors. Also, during the Civil War that happened because of the War of the Red Diamond, the Knights of the Nine were fractured, and 4 of the relics that belong to Perennial Whitestrake were actually used in the War of the Red Diamond.
And they shouldn't have, but they were.
Yep. Next up.
Yes, next up we have the Cameron Usurpers Invasion, which is a bit strange English, but basically in the Third Era, in the year 249 up until 267, Haemon Cameron, also known as the Usurper, or the Cameron Usurper, he was a pretender to the Cameron throne of Valenwood, and thus what he tried to do is basically conquer the entirety of Valenwood and Hammerfell with an army of Daedran undead. Now, also important to notice is that Haemon Cameron is basically a demigod.
He was said to be son of Molag Bal and an unknown priestess or something.
Yeah, oh god, and his son is, well, maybe not his direct son, but one of his descendants is the Cameron we see in Oblivion, who, well, Haemon Cameron is basically a Bosmer, but the other Cameron we see is a Altmar, and he apparently used a magic to change his fucking race, like you do. Anyway, during this invasion, he took over Valenwood and Hammerfell, which are not direct neighbors, because he also basically burned the west part of Cyrodiil in between. In the year 267, the combined armies of High Rock mustered the greatest navy they had ever seen, and defeated and killed Cameron Usurper and his armies on the Iliac Bay and on land. And there's like one book, The Refugees, which describes what it was like living in Hammerfell during the invasion, and it is scary. Like the sky would go red when he was nearing. Cameron the Usurper was nearing, and it's terrifying. So some major battles were in 253, the Battle of Dragontooth, where the defeated armies of Taneth and Rihad led to the fall of the southern Hammerfell, and the Battle of Firewaves in 267, in which basically the combined armies of Dwynn, Ikalon, Phrygia, and Cambria led to Dwynn's Baron Othrok, led by Dwynn's Baron Othrok, finally defeated Usurper. See, I told you we told you this thing is full of hard names. Next up, it's the end of that. Next up we have the invasion of Akavir. Finally, the reverse. Akavir has been invading Tamriel so often. Now it's time for Tamriel to invade.
They did it 2 times. Now it's time for us.
Yeah.
Was it successful as theirs? Maybe not.
maybe not so much. So, Uriel Septim the Fifth. it wanted to invade the continent of Akavir.
Wanted keys.
Yeah, wanted. So before he became emperor, he was already making preparations for this invasion in 268. So that's like 20 years before the actual war. And the moment he took throne, he just started off. The first thing he did is like, let's start a fucking invasion. And he started the invasion with several islands between Tamriel and Akavir, which concluded in the year 286, which is still not part of the war, or the official invasion, when the final scoutings were done on Akavir's soil. A special Far East fleet, the largest fleet in Tamrielic history, was created for the invasion. So you basically, the previous war ended with like the biggest navy ever, and then they one-upped that like 20 years later. So when the fleet was created, the expeditionary force was sent to Akavir in the year 288. That started the official invasion of Akavir. Despite the initial success, due to unusual weather, no permanent supply routes were possible to establish. Early in the winter of the year 290, the majority of Uriel's fifth invasion force, including thousands of colonists, were killed, and the emperor himself was slain in combat. It kind of feels like Napoleon, to be honest.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's like
when they went to the Russians.
The Russia, the cold winter, but it's not cold winter. It's just very eastern.
No. Like apparently, Akavir has like very unusual weather patterns, like very different.
Yeah,
not just cold, but like crazy weather.
That's one of the things that I wanted to talk about. That a lot of the wars, like as I said, are inspired by the real wars, like the War of Roses, being basically the Ransens War, the Breton soap opera and stuff like that. And there's not a single one of let's try to invade Skyrim and dying because of cold.
No, exactly. So, well, I think there's one journey where they tried to go to Atmora, but that wasn't an army. That was just a few individuals, and I never heard from again. So
yeah, that's a good question. Like, what's in Atmora now?
Yeah, who knows now? Maybe there's the dragons have been resurrected over there. They're heating up the place.
Because like there used to be Atmorans who were then Nords, but they all moved out, and you could have synced. So, but Atmora is still there. So is it just wasteland, or like, is it? Does it have lost civilization?
Who knows? Who knows indeed?
Who knows?
So up next we have several wars which all take place in the Imperial Simulacrum between the years 389 and 399, and what all of these have in common is that the Imperial battle mage Jaeger Thorn betrayed and secretly imprisoned Emperor Uriel Septim VII and used illusion magic to masquerade himself as the Emperor for a decade.
He basically imprisoned him in a pocket realm of Oblivion, and this is the entirety of the first game Arena.
Yes. So under the Simulacrum, the Imperial authority declined, resulting in several provincial wars. So basically, this one guy, Jaegerthorn, caused the next few wars, starting with
the 5-year war, which is a fun one because it took place between the Bosmers of Waylandwood and the Khajiit of Elsewhere. Now, the Bosmer claim that Khajiit bandits that started attacking the wood caravans that headed to Waylandwood started the war, but the Khajiit claim that it began when the Bosmer attacked the city of Torval. Who is right? Nobody knows. But what is known that this war was basically centered around a border dispute between these two provinces, and the bloody war lasted for about 4 3/4 of a year. It was named the 5-Year War. Eventually, Elsewhere defeated Valenwood and expanded its territory slightly west, taking both banks of the Xylo River.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
There are really disputes. They're not like full-on wars. Like
Yeah.
it says, it's a 5-year war. Yeah, like, but it's not like a conquest or anything. It's
No.
just like, oh, I want this side of the riverbank. Okay, let's quote unquote fight for it.
Come at me, bro. Next
Yeah,
up, yes, sorry. The next war took place in the year 396, which started the Arnesian Wars. I'm talking about. It started as a simple slave revolt in the house dress of the Dunmer, with the slaves being the Argonians, and it started in that house, the lands of that house to the south, and escalated into a full-on war between Morrowind and Blackmarsh. Basically, the beginning of the war was caused by the death of a Dunmer trader named Auroris, who was later seen as was basically remembered as a saint by the Tribunal Temple. Of course, Dunmer. He was captured by Argonian rebels, and when he refused to denounce his faith, he was brutally murdered after being tortured. When news of his death reached the rest of Morrowind, war was declared on Blackmarsh. Morrowind's armies ultimately defeated the Argonians and expanded Morrowind's territory in the south. So, more slaves for them. The father of the famous Dunmer painter Reith Lathantis was a known participant in the war, and after the peace was established, a commission was created to repair the damage done by the war. So, painting to save.
When you said the famous Dunmer, famous Dunmer painter, I was like, does he mean our friend Modrin Ore?
Yeah, from the Fighters Guild. No.
Yeah, I don't know if I showed this, but he's a famous painter too.
Yeah, he's famous for a different reason. So
anyway,
next war.
War of the Blue Divide. Blue Divide, War of the Blue Divide, named after the body of water that separates Somerset Isles and Valenwood, the little sea between them. It was a dispute again between the High Elves and the Wood Elves, where the High Elves demanded the coastal territory of Valenwood. They eventually won the war, gaining several islands west from Valenwood, and they basically destroyed all of Valenwood's harbors. That's it.
Some wars are a bit shorter than others.
Yeah.
Hold on, I was copying stuff. Next up is the. It is my turn. Yes. The War of the Bendirmak. Started to sound like I'm speaking Klingon here. Was a war that started in the year 397 in the Imperial Simulacrum between Hammerfell, Skyrim, and High Rock. Oh my nose. During the war, the Sky. God, sorry, I need to sneeze. Can't fucking sneeze. Alright, I perfectly timed that with muting the mic. During the war, Skyrim defeated the forces of Hammerfell and High Rock and took many miles of the eastern parts of those provinces, including the city of Elenhir and Yehenna. Some of these territories were claimed to have been lost in the previous wars at the expense of Skyrim. The war resulted in a deeper division between the Redguard factions of Crowns and Forebearers, as the Forebearer cities showed no inclination to help the Crown cities assaulted and occupied by the North, which in turn was a response to the lack of help by the Crowns to the Forebearers during the Cameron usurpers invasion. The resistance of both the Red Guards and the Bretons lasted long after the war was over. The most peculiar situation arose in the city of Dragonstar, where the city was divided into western and eastern section of the cities, walled off from each other, with each section having its own government and a desire to take control over the entire city, even resorting to acts of terrorism. Starting to sound a lot like Berlin and the Berlin Wall.
Yeah, a bit.
One such act of terrorism was by the members of the Mages Guild in Dragonstar, who used noxious enchantments on the Skyrim soldiers. The situation persisted for at least 30 years afterwards. After peace was established, a commission was created to repair the damage done after the war. So many commissions. And this war was actually used by Yggdrathorn and Pergan Azul to create a shadow of conflict, also known as Umbra Keth. Which, and also one of the known fighters was Sir Roderick of the Knights of the Nine. Interesting rumor. Next up, we have the invasion of the Battlespire, which is the events of the game Battlespire, in which the Daedric legions of Maroon's Dagon invaded the Imperial Battlespire, which we have described in the past, slaughtering the stationed Imperial battle mages and blocking reinforcements from Nirn. The invasion was suggested by Yggdrathorn to gain support of Dagon, Maroon's Dagon, that is. The Daedric armies retreated back into Oblivion, but the actions of Imago Storm and an apprentice ultimately led to the destruction of the Battlespire itself. And then we have another war. Wow, what a surprise there. The War of Botany. Not Bethany. Not Botany.
Bethany.
Yeah, it's got nothing to do with plants.
Yeah, Bethany is actually an island in the Iliac Bay. It's somewhat close to Strosmakai. It's actually just under the province called Daggerfall. Now, the War of Bethany was caused when Lord Mogrev asked King Lysandrus of Daggerfall for protection against pirates and other brigands. The king from Sentinel and his advisors, citing an old contract that suggested Bethany was a holding of their kingdom, declared war. Hostilities ended after Lysandrus' son Gohird, who became king after his father was killed in battle, won the battle and defeated the king of Sentinel in single combat. Sentinel was surrounded and Bethany passed under the control to Daggerfall. There are two books regarding these events called the War of Bethany. There are two versions, one from the author Vulpes Newgate, which is like the official history as written by the victors, and a book by a man named Fafti is the story from the viewpoints of the citizens of Sentinel. There were a few major battles in this conflict. The most notable one was the Battle of Craighold. The island of Craighold was besieged by the forces of Sentinel for several days, but the siege was broken by Daggerfall forces under Lord Bardwell. And that's about it.
Like we said, some wars are quite short. But not this one. Well, technically this is also a short one. The Oblivion Crisis.
Is this a war? Is this even a war?
I mean, in a way you could say it's a war, or even an invasion. Because it's the Daedra.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Daedra are invading.
Daedric invasion.
Yes, exactly. So, the Oblivion Crisis, which is the premise of the game Oblivion, which Tom is playing, also known as the Great Anguish, apparently, was a total war between the Daedra and the population of Tamriel. I'd say that's a big fucking war. It began with the assassination of Uriel Septim VII and all his known heirs. And arguably the first Oblivion Gate, which opened, was in Kvatch, in the sack of Kvatch, which, as you can imagine, did not end well for Kvatch.
Why do they call it sack?
A sack is like, it basically means the whole city is brought down, which it was. If you want to know exactly why it's called that, then find a dictionary or an etymologist. Currently, I don't know. So the Oblivion Gates started to appear all over the from the Deadlands, which is Mehrunes Dagon's realm. Started to appear all over Tamriel, and the Daedra poured out as a result of the fanatical cult of worshippers of Mehrunes Dagon, known as the Mythic Dawn. Widespread devastation and casualties resulted across entire provinces. The Daedra besieged Skyrim and laid waste to the old holds. In Black Marsh, the Hist called back many Argonians to fight off the Daedra. In fact, the Daedra commanders closed so many gates to stop the united Argonians from entering the Oblivion Gates, because having Argonians hyped up on Hist, all united, yeah, they're screwed. So that's why Argonians are pretty cool. In Cyrodiil, the city of Kvatch was entirely destroyed. Some Dunmer in the 4th era claimed that the Empire pulled out its forces from Morrowind during the crisis. However, no troops were recalled back to Cyrodiil from any of the other provinces during the Oblivion Crisis, so who knows if that's true. The Empire was nearly collapsed, but Uriel the Seventh's illegitimate son, Martin Septim, ended the invasion with the help of a mysterious hero, Tom. But the cost was enormous. Martin, last of the Septim bloodline, sacrificed himself and the Amulet of Kings to become an avatar of Akatosh and cast Mehrunes Dagon back into Oblivion, because he just took a stroll into Tamriel. This event marked the end of the 3rd era and the beginning of the eventual disintegration of the 3rd Empire. Aside from the sack of Kvatch, some other major battles that happened was the fall of Aldrun, which is in Morrowind, for those of you who don't know, was completely destroyed by the Daedra. And in an attempt to defend the city, the Redrun resurrected the Alskar Emperor Crab, which also died. So unfortunately, the Emperor Crab was not able to stop the Daedra.
If you know the meme from the 2000s, the giant enemy crab, the Alskar crab, that's it.
That's it.
Some houses in Morrowind are actually made from shells of these enormous crustaceans.
Mm-hmm.
Like the architecture even resembles them if it's made from clay or something else.
Mm-hmm. So
you can clearly see this in Skyrim if you have the DLC Dragonborn in the city of Ravenlock in Solstheim. The architecture somewhat resembles mud crabs in some sense.
Maybe.
Like the roof.
Okay, so it seems that we have to hurry up. We're almost at the end of our time in the recording.
Yeah.
So let me quickly mention that the Crystal Tower on Somerset Isles was also destroyed during the Oblivion Crisis, and basically majority of Cyrodiil was destroyed. Next, we begin the 4th era, and we're gonna go through these really quickly. So I hope you're ready, Tom. Oh no, okay. The Accession Wars. After basically the Empire no longer had an emperor, they were like, I want to be emperor. No, I want to be emperor. Like kids. So at first they, kind of had someone temporarily taking control, but then after the Argonian invasions, the Accession Wars is simply called the Argonian invasions. The Argonians took an opportunity of attacking Morrowind because Red Mountain erupted, and they sought revenge for thousands of years of slavery. And so they kind of so basically what happened was the Red Mountain exploded, or not fully, but Morrowind mostly devastated, and then the Argonians invade Morrowind, taking over a lot. So the Dunmer were not very happy after that. Next, we have the Umbriel crisis. Yes.
Yeah, the floating city of Umbriel came from south up through Black Marsh and southern Morrowind into Cyrodiil. Several major cities were destroyed and besieged, culminating in the assault of the Imperial city. The floating city of Umbriel is actually a part of a Daedric artifact, to speak. It's all documented in the real life books that the real life Elder Scrolls books that are centered around the city of Umbriel. The gist of it is that it's a floating city, killing people and resurrecting them, eventually culminating in the battle in the Imperial city when the floating city, when Umbriel took control of the Wild Gold Tower, and eventually it was banished from Mundus by a group of heroes.
Lovely. Next, we have the Great War, which I am assuming is going to become is going to get a different name in the future, especially if there's going to be a continuation. Because right now it's just got the same placeholder name as the First World War. It took place between the year 171 and 175 of the Fourth Era. The Thalmor referred to this war as the First War against the Empire, which is also not exactly accurate, where the Aldmeri Dominion invaded the Empire of Tamriel after Emperor Titus Mede II rejected an ultimatum presented by a Thalmor ambassador. The Dominion forces caught the Empire by surprise and apparently had a far better success than planned. Their success apparently encouraged them to go beyond the aim of conquering Hammerfell, and instead they decided to conquer the whole Empire. The Dominion's advance culminated in the sack of the Imperial city, which was under the occupation for nearly a year before its liberation in the Battle of the Red Ring. The war ended with the signing of the White Cold Concordat. Basically, the entire empire fell apart at that point. I can see that recording has ended. Oh, both recordings have ended. Wow, how perfect.
That's not good.
Then you have the Forsworn Rebellion, which first stage took place in 174 and up until 176. It's basically the Reachmen. They took over Markarth because they were like, "Hey, this is our land," so we took over, and then the Jarl of Markarth, who is the father of Jarl Igmund, who we see in Skyrim, called upon a militia led by Ulfric Stormcloak to retake the Reach. And he did. He shouted them off the walls. And, oh boy. So he only did that. He only saved the city so that if they allowed Talos worship again, which is against the White Cold Concordat, which was one of the early steps that Ulfric took, which eventually led to the final war. Tom?
Stormcloak Rebellion.
Yes.
It was a civil war in Skyrim that began in the 4th Era 201. Many years before, Ulfric was crowned Jarl of Windhelm. He formed the Stormcloaks as his personal army to carry out his agenda. Soon after, the young Torik was appointed High King by the Council of Jarls of Skyrim. Ulfric traveled to Solitude, challenged Torik to a single combat. It is not known if Torik accepted or not, but what is known that Ulfric used Foom, or the dragon shouting, to defeat Torik, and then he stabbed him with his sword and fled the city. He was then branded a murderer and a traitor to the Empire. After that, the Skyrim fell apart from inside, and the Imperial Legion sent General Tullius and his legion to Skyrim to sort things out. Then on the 15th of last seed, in the Darkwater crossing, while crossing the border to Cyrodiil, the Stormclaw garrison, together with their leader Jarl Ulfric, were captured and brought to Helgen for execution, together with the last Dragonborn. In a twist of fate, the village was suddenly attacked by the ancient dragon god Alduin, which allowed Ulfric and the last Dragonborn to escape. It is not known how the victory of the war, who was the victor of the war, because it's a quest in Skyrim and you get to choose.
Yes, well, we'll see in future games if they make one ending canon or one not. Personally,
Or there was a dragon break because we
yes, exactly.
killed a god.
That is, well, yeah, basically. So it's most likely going to be a dragon break, and it's going to be interesting how they're going to interpret both Skyrim becoming unified Nord, which is in preparation for their attack on the Altmeri Dominion, and also becoming a more powerful seat of the Empire. So who knows how that's going to end? But that is all we can do for today. Thank you very much. Yes, we're out of time. We're not. We're out of wars as well now. We have some conflicts, but
yeah, we have some minor conflicts like the Ethereum Wars.
Yeah, but we can talk about
Battle
that
of Moosring and
time.
stuff like that.
Yes,
it's the topic for another day.
Yes, exactly. So, thank you very much for listening, or watching, or both. And we will see you next week. Isn't that right, Tom?
I have no idea.
Well, isn't that ominous? All right. Thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.